This will be chapter one, and this is a book called Todd, T-O-D-D, Todd. It's written by J.C. on February 1, 2014 in Modesto, California. This is chapter one. Now I'll read it. Todd Orville Daniels awoke with a start. He felt mild panic. There were beads of sweat across his brow, and his eyes were wide open. He didn't realize that he had sat up. He wasn't sure, but he thought he may have shouted. He looked around as if expecting someone else to be there in the room with him, to have heard a shout, if indeed there had been one. No one else was there, of course. Todd strained to remember the dream he just had. It was actually more than just a dream in his mind. It was an event that actually took place, or so he thought. He would remember in a moment. He always remembered everything. Todd's name was really Theodore Orville Daniels, but nobody had ever called him Theodore. He had always been known as Todd. His mother named him Theodore, but his father never agreed with that name. He thought the name wouldn't suit him, and it didn't. So Mr. Daniels decided on Theodore's initials, T-O-D, and he added a D on the end, ergo Todd, T-O-D-D. Todd was born 12 years and 2 months ago, but to him it seemed more like 50. He had never felt normal, whatever that word meant. He remembers, even at a very early age, knowing what an answer would be, even before the question was asked. How can this be? He had asked himself many times. To that question, he had no answer. He tried to keep this to himself, wanted no one to know about it, and maybe treat him like some kind of freak, more than they already did. He was aware he was a freak of nature in ways more than just his size, but he didn't want anyone else to be overly aware of it. He was strange even as a baby. His head always looked much bigger than it should be for his body size, which was far too big at the very start. He weighed over 14 pounds at birth, a fact his mother made aware to him immediately. When he was finally forced from the womb, a thought formed in his supposedly unformed brain. It isn't my fault. A few moments later, when his mother's pain had subsided a bit, she screamed, "My God, never again, never again." She wanted someone to blame for her pain in giving birth, but her husband, Todd's father, was very normal in size, so she couldn't blame him. And so it had to be the fault of the baby, Theodore. His baby mind said, "No, I'm not." Then his mother looked at him, at his big body and bigger head, and aloud for all to hear, suggested he might be afflicted with Down syndrome. Todd's mind and body developed very quickly. He was extremely strong, even as an infant, and eventually walked almost without first crawling. He was put into a crib playpen with round side rails, a somewhat typical crib playpen. He was always laying on his back by his very unaffectionate mother. She never breastfed him. Instead, she started him on plain cow's milk right from the carton. Todd never complained, never cried, which reinforced his mother's opinion that he was retarded. Todd was aware in his baby mind that his parents' expectations of his mental and physical progress weren't very high, that he was expected to just lie like a lump for a year or two and do nothing but suck his bottle and soil his diapers. He also understood that his parents were not aware that he actually realized and understood what they thought and expected of him, to just be a big baby dummy. But he knew this wouldn't happen. He didn't move much for the first 3 months. Mostly just lay still, drank his milk, and soiled his diapers, and grew. No one was surprised. This was the way dummies were. His crib was against the wall just to the right of the sofa where his mother usually sat. There was about 7 feet of carpeted floor from his playpen to that sofa. His father always sat, leaned back with his feet up, in a recliner just a couple of feet past the sofa. One day Todd wanted to get into the reclining chair. He wasn't sure why. He just knew he wanted to. In his 3 months of life, he had never crawled and rarely even turned over off his back. But now he rolled over on his stomach and raised up onto his hands and knees. And in a kneeling position on his knees, Todd took two of the playpen side rails into his hands and shook them violently until they came out of their sockets, making a hole just big enough for him to crawl through. Then he half crawled, half walked to the recliner and was on his knees pulling on the footrest, trying to get it to extend when his parents walked into the room. His mother screamed and in a dead faint fell with a thud onto the floor. His father seemed not to notice that she had fainted. He just stood there, obviously frozen in place by surprise, staring at his baby boy. Then he acted as he always would from now on. He turned from looking at Todd and half picked up and half drug his wife to the sofa and got her onto it. Then he went into the bathroom and wet a towel and came back, and ignoring Todd completely, he placed the towel on her forehead. While he was doing this, Todd managed to climb up onto the recliner, and there he sat and watched what was going on. In a moment or two, Todd's mother awoke and sat up. Neither she nor her husband spoke. She just looked at the baby sitting there in the recliner, then, without a word, went into the kitchen and made coffee. She sat in a chair and stared at the kitchen tabletop for 12 minutes. For the 12 minutes it took the Folgers coffee to perk. Then she sat and stared another 2 minutes so the coffee could finish running through the coffee grounds holder and become just the right strength. When it was ready, she placed 2 large cups and saucers and filled the cups with hot coffee and added just the right amount of sweetener and creamer to each. Then she set the cups on a tray and carried it into the living room. She set the tray on the coffee table in front of the sofa and sat down next to her husband. Together they quietly sipped their coffee and looked at their baby boy, Todd, leaning back in his dad's recliner, watching all of this, watching them, and grinning his first grin. This is the end of chapter 1. I hope you enjoy it. This is JC.